Welcome to the Scaled podcast brought to you by Zero2One VC, where we bring you the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders and visionary venture capitalists. We're thrilled to invite founders and VC experts who are shaping the future of innovation. Join us as we dive into their journeys, insights, and the secrets behind their success stories. Get ready for a deep dive into the world of student-run venture capital, young entrepreneurs, and the minds that are driving it forward.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. We wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Genesis, your experience. A lot of our users don't know what that is, so if you guys could just tell us about what you do and what that is.
I can start with like a personal background for myself. So my name's Andrew Gunderman, obviously. One of the co-founders of Genesis with Toni. I also run a venture-backed startup called Coherence Finance. We deal in the crypto space. We're an app that lets you invest into like index funds for crypto, basically, with the social aspect. Think of it like a Twitter with a Vanguard mixed together. And then Genesis as well, which we can get into after Toni.
Yeah. Personal introduction. Name is Toni Witt. Also, obviously, co-founder of Genesis, but also co-founder of my own startup called Sweet. And we're ultimately trying to build peer-to-business payments. So kind of think like Venmo, but instead of paying somebody else, on Venmo, you're paying a business, essentially. Changing how basically people pay businesses at a very high level.
Yeah, for Genesis specifically, in terms of what Genesis is, the whole mission is, I'll start out with the problem. So if you are a young entrepreneur or somebody trying to do something interesting, venture-backed or not, just trying to do your own thing, if you live on the coast, you'll find a whole bunch of resources, a whole bunch of people around you doing the same thing, a whole bunch of people that are farther along that you can ask for advice, a whole bunch of opportunities for funding. If you're in the Midwest or somewhere in between the coasts, you'll find none of that. It is very difficult to find access to resources, access to connections, access to fundraising material. Anything that you need to actually build a big business is way more involved, way more active, way more easily available on the coast than it is in the Midwest. What we want to do long term is provide an organization that provides all of that. Something where you can go to, sits in the center of everything, provides all the connections you'd need to all the VCs or investors, all the connections to angel investors, all the connections to educational material, whatever you need, we want to be that place to provide it. Right now, we're just a very large community for young entrepreneurs, and we're working towards that.
How do you guys plan on kind of going about that? Like it's a big ask, to have that system of young entrepreneurs and then give them all these resources that are actually valuable.
Yeah, well, the first step is you have to have the resources yourself. And so the first step is really to build a big brand around what we're building. That's what we've been trying to do, and we're doing that through larger events. So this goes into the venture crawl that we were talking about before this, which is coming up in January. And I can get more into that later, but it's a very large event that we'll have. We'll have probably 300 plus people throughout the day for our events. This will be startup/VC focused people who are very involved in the business world. A whole lot of young people and a whole lot of people who are older too. But the purpose with these big events is really to be the top of the funnel, get a lot of people involved, get a lot of people hearing about Genesis, get a lot of the major organizations involved so that after this venture crawl and after people have been to one of our events, they're like, wow, this organization is serious. This organization is doing stuff. It's going places. And once you have people on the top of the funnel, you can start finding people that are very high quality, put them together in private dinners, build those relationships, build an ecosystem around yourself. And then through building that ecosystem, you have a whole bunch of resources now. Now you have access to the people who have created the multi-$100 million companies. You are also angel investors. You have access to all of the VCs that you can connect to your young founders now. So a lot of it is just like building a very big brand, building out the top of the funnel, and then through that quantity, we can pull out the quality. We can give real resources to people that way.
And on that, like pulling the quality out of the quantity, right? Yeah. Right now, our events are mostly public. Like our large events are public. We do have like private dinners from time to time. But moving forward, like I guess we'll see. But we might actually launch a private like membership community out of it, where we still have these like large public events, but then we actually charge like members monthly or whatever, and then they actually get like a set of these, private event invitations and like access to the right resources to help them build a business.
Yeah, there are a lot of problems that we're trying to solve. We're already the largest community of Gen Z founders in the Midwest. There are thousands of us all over the country. We've hosted huge events like, we talk about like, we had a 400-person party out in San Francisco a little while ago. We've held stuff in New York at the Google office. We've kind of been all over the country. A lot of this is just like building up the brand, and that's the phase that we're in. And then it's like next year we want to start getting really active in other cities, maybe towards the middle to tail end of next year. Because so far we've been very active in Chicago. We've held a few events in other cities too, but next year will be a year of really like finding out the model that works really well for us and then expanding that to other cities.
So is the goal for Genesis something like where an entrepreneur has a cool idea or is just kind of wants to be in the space but doesn't know where to start, and Genesis is the place where you kind of go, from top to bottom, what is venture capital, what is startups, what is founders, or is it more for people that are experienced, that are ready for fun?
So it kind of starts with, and maybe to kind of paint the picture a little bit, I'll tell the story of how it started, actually.
Sure.
So early days, neither of us are from Chicago, where we live now. And I moved from Europe, you moved from the middle of nowhere in Ohio, essentially. And we were like, wow, we're in this new city. Like, we need to build a network. We need to find access to the right people, right investors, right potential co-founders, advisors, etc. And even beyond that, just friends, right? Like, literally, if I'm going to survive in this new city, I'm going to take this leap of faith and try to build this new company, this new ambitious thing. I have to have friends, right? They can, like, a support network around me. And if you're in university, you kind of have that, like, to an extent, right? Like, you can go out and you can go to events and this thing's set up because it's all a bunch of young people. But if you're a dropout or like recent grad or an adult, a young adult, that ecosystem doesn't really exist for you. And so anyway, I had that problem, like, personally. So I literally, the first event that we hosted, before it had a name, before anything, I rented a Airbnb, like this beautiful cottage in the woods, for like $900 or like $1,000 or something for a weekend. And I literally just DM'd like 15 young founders on Instagram, LinkedIn, like, yo, you guys want to hang out for a weekend? Yeah. And surprisingly, they said yes. I mean, founders, like, we're all a little bit crazy, right? And yeah, we hung out for a weekend, did all sorts of stuff from podcasting to, we did like Wim Hof, like ice swimming in the morning, which was really fun, hikes, and really just connecting like young, ambitious people in the same sort of mindset together. And actually, out of that one weekend, we had like 2 separate pairs of people that ended up becoming co-founders of their own startups, like from that one weekend, right? Right. Not to mention, like, we're all still friends and connected and helping each other in different ways. And that, I think, has been really the core for Genesis up to this point, is like, let's host these IRL events, these unique experiences that bring these like young, ambitious people together. And then they can in turn help each other in all those different ways that Andrew mentioned. Like, he and I provide thousands, like literally hundreds of like introductions for each other every month. Like, and it's the same, like, with whether that's advisors or just advice or whatever. Right. Really, the like, one of the theses that I've had for a while is like, you need to build these deep relationships with other founders that are in the same boat if you're like really going to make it like long term as like somebody that builds businesses. Especially
something you eventually realize when you get into the startup ecosystem is everybody that you want to know knows each other. So like, there are these 2 people I'll name specifically. There's like Sam Yegan and Andy Dunn in Chicago, and they both are very successful, have built multi-$100 million companies. And these are both 2 people that, as a young entrepreneur, you're like, I have to meet these guys. These guys are killing it. Right. And then you eventually realize these guys know each other. And it's like, everybody at the top always knows each other. And so I think if you want to be at the top, you're going to have to help yourself get those ins. You're going to have to build those relationships with people. And it's not going to come from just sitting in a room and just like coding all day. You're going to have to like go out there, put yourself out there, and build up the network.
Heard. Lots to unpack there, but there's a couple tidbits here and there, and then a kind of a previous discussion early in our conversation that was really interesting to hear. You guys both are not from Chicago, but now with the efforts you guys put in with Genesis, it is now the largest community in the Midwest. So I'm really curious to hear, what do you feel is your differentiation factor from the both of you that's really, came together to push forward this collective, right? How have we been able to bring together our experiences from external environments to cultivate a community within Chicago, a thriving community at that?
I think it's a focus on actually building an ecosystem that is vibrant and actually useful in doing things. So I don't want to like crap on this organization, but there's an organization that people compare us to sometimes called Gen Z VCs. And it's a really large organization and everything. And they have a huge Slack channel of like 30,000 people. But it's just, if you're a young founder and you join that for the first time, the experience will be like, you join their Slack channel and then you ask for help in the Slack channel and then nobody says anything. because it's just like the whole channel in a lot of cases is a lot of self-promotion, which is fine, but we want to try to be something that provides like actual real help and real value to people. We're still exploring how we can do that in the best ways possible, but something as simple as just like being active with hosting events, being active in the ecosystem. Like this venture crawl that we're going to host in January is going to have a lot of Midwest investors, and we have 50 plus VC firms already committed, and that's within 2 weeks of announcing the events. And we have 2 months to go until the event actually happens. Like we're gonna have probably like half the VCs in the Midwest all in attendance, and it's like the networking opportunities that provides are incredible. And I think it's been a big focus of just like merging different ecosystems. Something you'll notice, especially in the Midwest, is all these cities are siloed, and inside the silos you have more silos, and so there's nothing that sits in the middle that connects everything, and that's what we want to be.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of poses a good question. I think a lot of college kids have, a lot of entrepreneurs have, taking it a step back. So this is like the goal of what you guys want to have. And you kind of mentioned how you got people to go to this house, as you just messaged on LinkedIn. But going about this whole networking process, like what are these, tangible pieces of advice? I'm asked this question all the time: is Mitchell, how do you network? And it's a difficult question to answer because do you reach out to hundreds of people, or do you go through warm connections, or what platforms do you use? And there's all these questions that surround it. So I mean, you guys have found success there. What's kind of the approach?
I mean, when it comes to like networking, and I'm kind of realizing this alongside everybody else, like we're not trying to be like, oh, we're all high and mighty, whatever. We know everything. We absolutely don't. But like, I have realized that building a strong network is it's a compounding process. You put in the right ingredients, and then you just have to give it time. And then over time, like every exponential curve in like the first whatever year, 2 years, 3 years is going to look flat as hell. But then at a certain point, every exponential curve kind of does that, and like building your network is the same way in that like you put in the right ingredients and put in enough time and it will work out. So then the question becomes, what are those like right ingredients? And honestly, I really believe they're like a lot simpler than anybody else thinks. It's figuring out who do you want to be like and DMing those people on LinkedIn, on email, on calling them, get like a VA, like go on Upwork, get a VA to like build a list for you for like 300 leads of like successful entrepreneurs or whatever in my industry, XYZ. And then just literally email all those things like that, like replying to emails. It's like, it's the simplest stuff, but like reply to texts, like be there on time. And then when you're really like new to a new city or a new like ecosystem or industry, go to like every single event. Like that's inevitable. Like nowadays we don't actually go to like public events anymore because it's just not that much ROI and like we know most of the people, etc. But when you're early on, like you have to be going to every single thing. And honestly, like you do those things and then over enough time, like you get enough introductions from people you already know to the exact other right people that you need to know. And it sort of,
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is just don't be super transactional with things. I don't know. I try to take the approach, and this always sounds so cringe, and I honestly hate that it sounds so cringe, but I think it's so right. Like you really have to go about things with a give first attitude. You're gonna get taken advantage of a ton. Like there's gonna be a ton of time that you just waste, and you never see any value for it. But they're gonna be. It's like a Pareto distribution. I always say that, and people don't always know what it is. But like it's the whole theory of like 20% of the introductions you'll make, or the 20% of the people you'll make will make like 80% of the difference in your life. Like it's gonna be the few times that work out really well that'll change everything for you. And I think people tend to make it really complicated, like Tony's saying. Like this stuff is probably not that complicated. I think people tend to make it really complicated out of an avoidance of wanting to do like some of the work you need to do to get there, because it really is a grind. Like it takes a lot of time meeting people. I've done a lot of coffee chats. I've sent a ton of outreach, so many DMs. I've been ignored literally more times than I can count. But like over time you do it and you develop enough good relationships, it really is exponential. Like for this venture crawl, like he and I both had decent networks in Chicago before, but with this venture crawl, especially in the VC world, like most of the VCs that we have coming to the venture crawl lunch that we have with all the investors with like 50 plus VC firms, most of that was like people we don't even know yet. Like I haven't even met half of these people. And a lot of it was just like building relationships with a core group of venture capital investors. And then once you have those relationships, you provide some value to them by being like, here's this event that we're putting on. Do you know someone else that should be in the event too? And like getting those warm introductions has been remarkably valuable. And then the last thing I'll say is like if you build the room rather than joining everyone else's room, it changes everything,
Mm.
because then it's like you know who's coming, you can tailor who's coming accordingly. You become an ecosystem builder. I think a lot of the extraordinary people in the world, they build ecosystems around themselves, and it's like if you make everyone around you better, it's going to help you, because then it's the whole concept of rising tide lifts all ships.
Right.
So I think those are what I would say to that.
Heard. Tony, you mentioned that with where you guys are, you guys don't necessarily attend as many like public events anymore because the ROI isn't there, right? Either know the people there or just with where Genesis is and where you guys are, there's other ventures to focus on. With that being said, right, with how much momentum Genesis has, I'm sure there's a lot of variables to kind of consider when thinking about the right path towards growth. So with that being said, what are those kind of tangible thoughts you guys are having in terms of how to actually grow Genesis? What steps do we want to take to, approach this growth, X, Y, and Z?
I mean, right now, like we're kind of laser focused on these two big events that we're putting on in the new year.
Heard.
We already mentioned one of them, the Windy City Venture Crawl, which
yes,
we probably, I don't know if we gave like an actual like
can we hear a little bit about that
introduction?
one?
Yeah, so here we go.
Please.
But it's basically, I mean, venture crawl, so it's a little bit like a bar crawl, but instead of crawling between bars, we're crawling between VC offices.
That's awesome.
Sounds nerdy as heck, but
Which
really cool concept. It is a little bit.
Right.
But basically, at each of these offices that we're crawling between, we have a set of founders pitching, and then a small like, networking session. And really, it's just an opportunity for founders and investors to get together and really like kind of showcase the Chicago like venture world as a whole, and then connect the young founders into that essentially.
Yeah.
So that's like the sort of concept, and that's going to be, like Andrew said, like huge event. We have 3 offices lined up, 5 total venues. There's also this lunch that we're putting on, private lunch that day, and then an after party for about 300 people as well, which is going to be a little bit more performing artists, a little bit more fun, some drinks out. And so, yeah, we're focusing a lot on that. And then the other thing is actually a founders retreat that we're putting on in Costa Rica, which is kind of, I guess, the other end of the spectrum. Venture Crawl is a very public, very large event. Costa Rica is a very small, exclusive, private event. High level, like we rented a villa for a month in Costa Rica, like right on the beach. And we're inviting some of the country's like best and brightest young entrepreneurs. Like we're talking whatever, if you want to look at the lists, like the Forbes listers. Just the other day, we had a guy who was on Shark Tank last year, which is pretty cool. And all sorts of just very interesting people, very interesting stories and perspectives, who are all like at their core ambitious young business builders, essentially.
Yeah.
And then a month long of just co-working, wellness stuff, yoga stuff, cooking, surfing. It's like right on Costa Rica's like most famous surfing beach, essentially. So those 2 events are kind of soaking up most of our time. After that, granted, we still have to like figure ourselves out a little bit, like what are the best like, distribution channels, and how do we actually funnel people from these large events into like a membership community to like really provide a lot of value to these people. Granted, I do think a lot of growth in this world comes from just referrals, like direct introductions. Like that's how we put a lot of the like private events together for the Windy City Venture Crawl. We literally just asked investors, hey, do you know any other investors that might like to come? And they like almost immediately like gave us introductions. So boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And that like literally exploded our like own networks as well. So that's like a big metric. And then there's a list of like a dozen other like I guess distribution strategies that you can pursue: social media, content marketing. We're testing out and kind of categorically like seeing which of these is like really sort of the best strategy to pursue. But like right now, like referrals has been really big.
Yeah, and especially I think one of the things that we want to focus on. So I think we're very ambitious because this is just who we are, I guess. Mm-hmm. So expanding to other cities is going to be a big priority eventually, like having a very active presence, having somebody in those cities who leads the Genesis like chapter there, basically. Something that I've been toying around with the idea of as well has been like the idea of franchising out a newsletter, which I don't think I've ever seen done before. Because if you think about the startup ecosystems in any city are almost always tailored towards the city, right? Like Chicago has a whole bunch of organizations that are focused on, these are events for the Chicago ecosystem, and Chicago this and Chicago that. And so I think expanding Genesis is like a organization across the country, but then also having it be very personalized to the individual city is very interesting, which is where the idea of having like a general Genesis like newsletter,
Yeah.
but then also having newsletters for each individual city. And we can like find ways to automate a lot of this. Luckily, I'm technical, so I can build software for certain things if we need to. But also just like building out these communities all across the country. But also finding ways to make it so it's like this is the person to go to in your city for entrepreneurship. You know, like I really am obsessed with the idea of like 5 years down the road in every, you know, university in America, it's like if you're a young person and you want to start a business, you sit down with your entrepreneurship professor and you're like, I want to start a business. I don't know how to start. I don't know where to go. What do I do? I want that default answer to be like, you need to go join Genesis. Like they will help you with everything. They'll get you started.
Right.
They'll help you meet the right people. They'll help you get funded if you need it. Like everything you need is going to be a part of Genesis. And like that's what I want to move us towards. That's going to be a very long-term goal. It's going to take a lot of work and time to get there. In terms of growth, yeah, what he said, and then expanding city to city, I think too. Focus in the Midwest is a good niche, but eventually we want to expand beyond that too.
I mean, so I'm assuming you guys meet with a lot of founders. You guys seem to have a pretty big network. Something I'd be interested in, I'm sure a lot of people in our shoes are also interested in. What are those qualities beyond the usual podcast answer, beyond the usual Google search on what makes a good founder? I mean, you guys meet so many, you probably have some cool insights there on what makes a founder successful.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're still young and still seeing stuff, so we'll see kind of how these traits play out. But I actually have a weird opinion I've been toying with recently where I feel like in a lot of cases, if you meet a founder, you kind of just get a vibe of like, I think this person's going to do something.
I actually agreed.
Yeah. Like you don't know if this company's going to be successful necessarily, but you get a good vibe of like, I think this person's going to be somebody. Like, I don't know who they're going to be, but they're going to do something big. And like Toni and I were talking about this in the drive out here too. Like there are just certain people I meet, and like UIUC has had a lot of them recently where like, I'm just like, you're going to go somewhere. Like you're hungry and I can tell. And like for me, I think a lot of it's just like, are you hungry? Like, are you starving? Are you working all the time? Or are you one of those people who's like, oh, sorry, I don't take meetings on weekends? You know, like you might be successful if you don't take meetings on weekends, but I think the people that are like really striving, to me, are the ones that really fascinate me, because like I think most of the people that really, really change the world, I think a lot of cases are people that are working all the time and they're doing stuff all the time. They're improving all the time. And so for me, that's kind of something I focus on.
Heard. I would also really quickly add, sorry, Josh.
No,
like, this is a really unusual answer, but I have noticed there is some like positive correlation between people who either moved to a different place or like took a very large like leap of faith by like quitting a very important job, and really often actually moving to like a new place that they didn't grow up in, where they don't have a network in. That has actually been like a catalyzer for them realizing like, I need to like grow my network from scratch. I need to like learn again how to like make new friends, which it seems like a small thing, but given that like business really is like honestly all about relationships, like, especially on the long term, moving to a new place and putting yourself in that environment where like you're kind of forced to do that. I do think like some of the most like successful people that we know, they all have moved and like they were all in that state where we once were. We're like, we come to a city like with 2 suitcases and that's it. Like literally, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know. That's just like a really interesting.
No,
I think also like you've got to be able to take a risk. You know, like, if you
comes hand in hand.
Well, there have been some conversations I've had with people where maybe this is like a bad sales tactic, but like we're like talking about the venture call, for example, and I'm like trying to convince them to like fly out.
Right.
But like some of these conversations, I'm like, you know, maybe the venture call doesn't mean anything, but like you've got to be able to be like, I have this opportunity in front of me, I am not going to waste it. And that's something that I'm obsessed with. Is like, do you make use of the opportunities you have, or like with all these opportunities that you get, you kind of just like don't do anything with them? Because I feel like especially Toni and I are getting to the point where we can like make certain introductions for people that are really useful. And like if you're not going to explore those opportunities or explore like the introductions we make, or you're not going to like do something that it's like you could at least give this opportunity enough effort that it might turn into something. Like if you're not even going to take those steps, then you know, I really doubt your ability to be successful unless you're like gonna use other opportunities, and like not everyone's gonna be perfect with every opportunity.
Or entrepreneurship isn't for you, which is okay too. Like I say that genuinely. Like you can find a beautiful life doing something else. But maybe entrepreneurship.
I just think though, like, you know, we're so young, it's kind of hard for us to know. But I really look at like a lot of the core Genesis group, the people that have been around for like the whole time, where they're constantly striving and they're constantly growing, constantly learning things, constantly trying things. I think those are the people that are going to be really successful. And so I think in terms of like actionable advice for people, I think it's like constantly trying things, actually putting in hard work and putting in a lot of hours. Some people are obsessed with like 4-hour work weeks and whatever, and I don't know, maybe that works, but I think like in the average case, you're going to be competing with people that are putting in more hours, and so like you've got to be able to compete. I think a lot of it though is like having the right network, trying enough things, because there is some aspect of luck in business. Like everything in life, there is always going to be some aspect of it.
Right.
You have to put yourself in a position to get lucky, and if you're not actually doing that, you're not building the right relationships or putting yourself in the right rooms or situations for you to have something good happen to you, then I don't think you're going to have anything good happen to you. Like if you're in a small town like where I was from, like Hillsborough, I'm never going to be like, oh, accidentally built $1 billion company here. Like that's just not going to happen. You know, you've got to be in a situation where something big can happen for you.
Heard. Just to emphasize it, right? You guys mentioned multiple times that you guys are quite young, and just to reiterate, clarify, right? How old are we talking, Tony?
I'm 21.
Okay. I just turned 22.
21, 22, right? And these are 21, 22-year-olds that are founders of their own startups, that have created a thriving community within the Midwest ecosystem, the largest, to say the least. With that being said, right, I want to really hear your thoughts as to how you guys represent this next generation of change, right? With being 21 and 22, we are going to be those next leaders up. So with that being said, being at that level of success, that level of momentum, what do you feel as we differ in terms of how we represent ourselves, how we represent our professional careers versus the older generation?
I mean, in some ways, this actually ties back to, I guess, like the very first event that we hosted, which, and you can read like blogs about this, and they say this a lot, but like Gen Z cares a lot about authenticity. We just have a like very strong inherent like bullshit detector on like when a company's selling to us or when whatever. Not to say the older generations don't have that, but I do think, especially for our generation, and I can really only talk for myself, but like I imagine that a lot of other people are in the same shoes, but like post COVID, like my last 2 years of high school were in COVID. So like I kind of had friends, but like we were just on Discord every day. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't seeing them in person.
Right.
And so that friendship stuff wasn't there. And like after that, I really was like, wow, I literally, just build like genuine, authentic relationships. And I think Gen Z has kind of taken that into the business world to an extent. Like a lot of the young people that I deal with, whether they're founders or investors, they feel a little bit more like real in the workplace. Some older people sometimes,
Amen to that.
You know what I mean? They still have certain like barriers in place and just traditions from past generations that have like add sort of layers in between, where it's like we're not just two kind of people hanging out. And I always joke like when we launched that private membership community, if and when I'll say, it's like how do we gauge if this is the right person for Genesis? And I always joke like the test for me is are they dappable? What's the dappability? Can I dap them up or not? Like literally, that's like my benchmark test. And if I don't feel comfortable dapping that person up, then they either don't have the right mindset or they're just like not in the right generation, the right like.
Interesting.
Low, I'm just like your bud, like I'm just your man. Like come on, let's just, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's like my test.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of this is just like you got to be able to be yourself. I think it's very easy nowadays with how much people are being sold on everything to detect stuff that's just like garbage. So I think it's like you guys. I've had so many conversations with people. Like I think there's kind of a joke around some of my friends where like my ambition is my whole personality. Like I have no personality other than just like being ambitious, which is like maybe there's an argument that that's true, but like I think I've had certain people that are like you should really tone that down. You're gonna like freak people out or like scare people. And I always go back and forth on that, and maybe it depends on the audience and everything. But to me, I'm just like, I think you have to just be who you are and just act how you want to act. Obviously, like have some semblance of like
with caveats.
Yeah, but like I think at the end of the day, you just gotta be yourself. Gotta represent who you are individually. I think that's like the starting point.
Heard. So, kind of touching back on the fact that you guys are founders and you guys are literally operating a whole thriving community. I'd love to hear you guys speak on the kind of the dark side of things, right? Obviously, you guys are very competent people, and I could tell you guys are very high ambition just from what you guys have accomplished, but also just how you guys compose yourselves. But what have been the sacrifices that you guys have had to make to get to where you guys are now, managing both your own company and this vibrant ecosystem?
I mean, for me personally, family, like less time with family.
Heard.
Some people This again like ties back to, if you're in the same place that you grew up in, like you're liable to spend a lot of time with your old friends who may not be in the same mindset of you, who also want to build a business and they're kind of holding you back.
Yeah.
Or family who can also have that effect. And so sacrificing a lot of time with family has been like a big thing for me. Leisure, sleep time occasionally. There's a pretty long list of other sacrifices.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's worth it. It's worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think sometimes also you kind of give up the leisure, or give up the lovely ability to just be like, oh, you know what, I don't care about this situation. Because like sometimes you get into situations where like, oh shoot, this is like really, really important and I like have to fix this, or you're like dealing with, my company is very regulated, so I deal with like government agencies all the time. And so you get put into situations where it's not necessarily a sacrifice, but where you might be like, oh shoot, I'm extremely nervous, like meeting people that you're like, oh, this person could literally send me to jail if they wanted to. Just from like being regulated, you meet examiners or you meet people that are like trying to, protect the general public. And so like that was a whole area that I wasn't really expecting to get into because I never run like a regulated company before. But yeah, it's like the basic ones like sleep, like family time. Yeah, definitely.
Basic human needs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like food sometimes. No. I mean, it's just like you're gonna give up a lot of stuff, but I don't know. Something I've been telling someone recently is like, you've also just got to be able to fight for yourself, and I think you do kind of lose parts of yourself on this journey. And I think in a lot of cases, if you do it right, you're losing parts of yourself that at the end you're like, dang, I'm happy I lost that side of myself. But like, it's like I've had conversations with people recently where they like had no backbone. Like you're gonna have to develop this here, and it's gonna be rough, and it's gonna be brutal, and it's gonna be really uncomfortable. But you're gonna have to learn how to like stand up for yourself and fight for things, because the business is business. Like you're gonna get a lot of people that are gonna be ruthless, and you've got to be able to like stand up for yourself and make stuff happen. Like I think in business, when you're not protected by, oh, I just have a salary coming next month, like you have to force things into existence. Like, sometimes you have to be, a little bit ruthless too, like just like how the world works, I think.
What are both the startups you guys are working on, if you don't mind talking just kind of briefly?
Yeah, I believe we reiterate, we did mention in the beginning, but so I'm working on Sweet, and we're a payment startup, so we're trying to build peer-to-business payments. We're actually in the beauty industry right now, as kind of a recent pivot that we've made. But like a lot of time, if you go to the barbershop, right, you're paying your barber with Venmo or Zelle. The problem with Venmo or Zelle, from like their perspective, it's not a tool made for businesses. It's not a tool made for the beauty industry or anything. It's illegal to take payments as a business through Venmo. Venmo doesn't have any analytics or just any like business support really at all. And so we're really trying to build a closed loop so-called payment system that allows them to kind of have like that Venmo effect, meaning like avoiding credit card processing fees, but still with like the simplicity of just having a wallet on your phone that they can like easily accept payments on. So like peer-to-business instead of like peer-to-peer payments at a very high level.
Yeah, for me, building Coherence, we're, I guess the simplest way to put it, you could think of it like a Twitter mixed with a crypto vanguard. So we sell only crypto right now. We're considering adding traditional equities as well eventually, but it's just like an app you can download. You can think of it kind of like a Robinhood with the social aspect built into it, like a Twitter on top. So
people can make comments on different things.
Yeah. People can talk about like the different investments they make. Because if you think about it, like in a lot of cases, if you're making an investment decision, you're not making it in a silo. You're going and reading up on whatever you're investing in, going and talking to your friends or your family about it, going to other people in the community, being like, oh, what do you think about this? Like, why should I invest in it? You're always taking in some kind of social proof, but then there is no app that just puts that all in one group for you, or all in one app for you. So that's what we try to do.
Have you guys always been entrepreneurial? Has it been something that you've kind of always decided you wanted to do? Is it something that happened as you moved here? Or kind of what was that process like?
I don't think I was per se. I actually was more, I think I had the character traits that make me like a better entrepreneur. And I've always had those, at least for like many years of my life. But I was not always like interested in starting a business. That's been like really just the last few years. I literally could not tell you why that is, to be honest. Like, I don't know what drew me to business, but I guess I was also ambitious and had a good work ethic or whatever, and it kind of made sense. But before this, I was actually I wrote a book, so that was like my big previous project.
Yeah.
Was I was a writer, and I still am. I still love writing. I still love creating stories, and yeah, I was that one weird kid in high school that was trying to write a book during his classes, not really completing his homework.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it took me 2 years and like 10 drafts across. Like, if I were to print all of the drafts together of like original words, it would probably stack like this high, like some just crazy stuff because I didn't have anything else to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like my big thing before entrepreneurship. But I think there's a lot of like lessons that I got from that project that kind of carried over as far as whatever time management and all that.
I don't think I've always been entrepreneurial, but I've definitely been entrepreneurial for the last like 6 or 7 years of my life. So I built two companies before building Coherence. But these are more like lifestyle businesses, so they were just like things that I coded up, websites or apps that I built. And then, it's not like they were something that were going to become like worth 10 million or 50 million or something like that, because they weren't like venture backable. Well, they were venture backable, but nothing I ever raised venture with. But I mean, I've been dealing with investors since I was relatively young. My backstory is kind of weird. Like, I'm from a really small town, and so there wasn't really much opportunity where I was from. I remember, this is a story I always love to share, but my mom explicitly, I had like come to her one day and I was like, I want to get an internship, my freshman year of college for like software. She's like, Andrew, your older brother is a developer. He didn't get an internship freshman year. You're not going to either. So as a normal young ambitious person, I was like, okay, screw you, watch me. And then I ended up having like 5 internship offers in high school. So even before she had talked about it. And then through my internships, I had ended up getting close with a guy who's running a very big business, like all over the country, all over the world. He had like thousands of employees, very successful man. He's like one of those guys you meet and you're like, oh my goodness, like, holy crap.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my first inspiration, I think. And I think it was like seeing the amount of respect that people gave him, just seeing how incredible he was. To me, that was like okay, you know what? Being a developer, that's not good enough. I want this. Like, I want to walk into a room and everybody go quiet and be like, okay, he's arrived. Like, I want to be somebody who it's just like, wow, when you're around them. And so like to get to that point, there is no other alternative except starting businesses. Like, you're not going to become an incredibly wealthy and successful and connected person by being an employee. And so like to me, that was just like, okay, so let me just like start trying to solve problems as with what I can right now, which is software. And so then that was the route that I took, and ever since then, I've been building things.
Heard. Speaking kind of on this thread of upbringing, identity, and the kind of the superpower you bring, right? I want to ask, what do you guys feel are your superpowers? Something that really is unique to you, that really helps you excel and provides that advantageous edge to your startup, to Genesis.
I think this is a really weird answer.
Talk to me.
But to me, I'm like, I've always wondered, like, the idea of like, you're really, really good at something. Like, what are you like the best in the world at? Like, obviously, I don't think I'm the best in the world at anything, but the thing I always come to is like, literally, it's not like a skill or anything. It's just like, I'm super ambitious. Like, I want a lot. Like, I'll never retire, I don't think. I always want to strive for more. Like, the whole idea of nothing ever being enough is exactly what I want. I don't ever want to be like settled and happy. Like, I want to always strive for things.
Yeah.
And I think to me, that's like one of my proudest traits. Is something I love about myself. And it's like, I think I talked to somebody recently about this, and it's really funny because they were like a relatively well-known investor, and they were talking about how they were like, I love to invest in founders that are mad about something, that have like a chip on their shoulder, where every day they're just like, I can't believe, this happened in my past, or that I went through this, or that the world works this way. I'm going to do something about it. And like, they're just constantly driven like a maniac every day about it. And I think, like, I think I have traits of that from being from a small town and being raised without opportunities like that. And I think, to me, that's exactly why I am where I am. Like, I don't even think I'm the smartest in most rooms. I think it's just purely based off of effort. It's like, I knew what I wanted and I attached my identity to it, and I sprinted at that for like 7 years.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify myself as like a founder that has. It's like there's some people that they're like just 1,000,000% at one kind of thing. They're just the absolute best in the world at one kind of thing. They got their gold medal in that kind of race, at that sort of thing. Yeah. I've never like been like that. Like I've always been a little bit more of a generalist, I think. And I think founders, to an extent, have to be. Like you can get great at one thing, and that will often get you a great job. But if you want to start your own business, you kind of have to be great at like a lot of different things, or at least like pretty good at a lot of different things.
Right.
And so I think that's been like a kind of common theme is I really try to like be sufficient at a few things, or like really great at like a handful of things, you know what I mean, versus like stellar at one kind of thing.
Right.
I would say like definitely one thing that I am pretty good at, I would like to say, is like building relationships, hosting events, like building community.
Yeah.
And as Andrew said, like that does come from like a personal chip on my shoulder, which is like when I moved to Chicago, like I just didn't know anybody. And like I said to you guys earlier, that was a like intense personal problem. And literally, you know, it started out small, and like now we're here, like hosting these crazy things all over the country and whatever. Amazing. But still, I think even now, I think like deep down, I still have this sort of like, man, I really do not want to be back in that place where I'm like, I just don't know anybody. I can't hit up anybody. I don't have any founder friends or investor friends that I can like just reach out to for help. So I think that kind of, that goes to Andrew's point. Like there's that deep chip, but like now I guess it was a weakness. Right, but you oftentimes you can like turn your like greatest weaknesses into like things that become strengths later on. You know what I mean?
That's a bar. Well, we want to wrap it up, but with that said, the last question I want to ask you too is, you know, with such a fruitful year, right? A lot of things going on. I want to ask the two of you, what is one objective you have for yourself that, you know, needs to be accomplished, or you want to accomplish by the end of this year? And this doesn't necessarily have to be a professional objective, but whatever comes to mind when you first hear that question.
Like this year by like the end of next month, or
sure, let's say end of next month, or even next year, whatever, however you guys want to take it. Just make sure you brief that before you give your answer.
I mean, 1 month away is short.
It is a little short.
That's like the realm of like strategic sort of. We have like certain numbers we want to hit, or
right.
Things that we want to achieve, and that's like a very boring discussion. You don't want to get into that. That's like I'm trying to DM like 600 people. That's like a level of clarity that like we kind of build down to when it comes to a month. As far as like 12 months from now, like a year from now, it's funny. Honestly, at this point, things are moving quickly enough where I have a lot of difficulty in predicting what can happen in 12 months. And I think that's a really cool place to be.
Right.
Because like prior, I'd be like, yo, in 12 months, if I could make it into this college, that would be crazy. Nowadays, it's like in 12 months, I literally like what's happened just based on some of like what's happened in the last like month or two, or even 6 months. It's like, wow, if that kind of exponential curve keeps going, like it literally just becomes hard to like even fathom like what is possible over the next like 12 months or 18 or 5 years. Forget about it. I can't make any predictions. I have internal goals. You know what I mean? I want to meet Obama.
Okay, gotta meet Obama
or whatever.
Hey, we have Obama's CTO.
We literally know like multiple people in his like administration, like high up in his administration.
50% there.
So we're already like literally one step away. So like, but that's the thing about knowing a lot of people is just there's so much spontaneity that can come out of that, like random things. Like that's the cool thing about knowing a lot of people. That cool things can happen, and then it just becomes the randomness effect. Like you just don't know what's going to happen.
I will say, like, he's so right. Like, a lot of this really is like exponential. Where, like, literally, a year ago, he and I, like, a year and a half ago, neither of us were like in Chicago. And, like, I was just like a normal college student. You know, he was just
I was
like
a dropout.
And like within the last year and a half, things have been insane. Especially within the last like 3 months. The last 3 months have been ridiculous. And we were like nonstop traveling, and we were like, you know, like in Seattle, DC, like all over the place, New York, San Francisco, like constantly meeting some of the most incredible people that like people like I was like, reading about for like years, and then it's like you meet them, you're like, whoa, that's wild. I did not expect that at all.
And now we're going to Costa Rica with them and stuff. Like for a month, it's just going surfing with them. Like it's just like
exactly. So like I think a lot of this is just like it was built up for a long time, and we're building a critical mass, and now we're getting to the point where like everything's really exponential. And so the last like month or two has been like absolutely truly ridiculous. And I think, like I said, it's just putting yourself in a position to have something exponential happen to you, whether it's like meeting a lot of the right people or building a business that has the potential to go exponential. Like doing something, like any actionable advice I have for anyone is like putting yourself in a position where something exponential can happen.
That one, like, I think it was Paul Graham, maybe, but like increase the surface area
Yeah.
of luck.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And really, like, major things in that are move to like a big city that's known in your industry. If you want to go and get in a film, go to LA.
Yeah.
You're like surface area of luck. You might meet somebody on the street, you know what I mean, that like happens to be a director of a big studio, and then boom, that's how your career takes off.
And San Francisco was
San Francisco,
yeah,
same
met
thing.
two billionaires
Yeah.
on the side of the road. So
Like,
it's like,
literally,
yeah. It's just like you meet some of the most ridiculous stuff from just like being in a place where you can get lucky.
Mhm.
And this is why I talk about like there are people, if you see them and you think they have potential, you gotta attach yourself to them because it's like even if they're like younger and less accomplished than you, in 12 months or 5 years they could be bigger than you. You have no idea. But if you see people like constantly striving, I think you just got to be around them. This is why we're building Genesis. Is like, in 10, 20 years, we want to be like, oh yeah, literally all of the billion-dollar companies built in the country were like Genesis people. Like that's the level that we want to get to, where it's just like, this is the dominant community for young, ambitious people.
All right.
That's awesome.
Artificial PayPal mafia.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that was like one of the original inspirations.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for taking the time to talk to us. Very insightful. Great to hear from you guys. Hopefully, the users can draw the conclusions that we've tried to pave for them. But thanks, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
you guys so
Thank
much.
you guys for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right.
So how do I join?